வெல்கம் டு லிட்விட் சேனல். இன்றைக்கி நாம் ஜான் மில்டன் எழுதிய ஆன் ஹிஸ் பிளைண்ட்னஸ் போயம் பற்றி தான் பார்க்க போகிறோம். இந்த வீடியோவில் போயமோட எக்ஸ்ப்ளனேஷன், லிட்டரரி டிவைஸ், ERC, ஷார்ட் ஆன்சர் அண்ட் சம்மரி தான் பார்க்க போகிறோம். John Milton, born in London, year 1608, dead in 1674. He is the greatest epic poet of the Puritan age in English literature. On His Blindness poem is a sonnet. It is a lyric poem consisting of 14 iambic pentameter lines indicated by rhyme scheme. The rhyme schemes are ABBA, ABBA, CDE, CDE. On His Blindness generic form is Petrarchan sonnet having an octave and sestet. The Petrarchan sonnet from in this poem falling into parts. The first 8 lines are called octave, rhyming ABBA, ABBA, that reviles the poet fears and complaints. The second 6 lines are called sestet, rhyming CDE, CDE, that teachers tell submission to God's design. Let's see the poem line by line. When I consider how my light is spent, year of my days in this dark world and wide. In this poem, the poet Milton lamented his blindness. The poet first complained to God that he had been blinded by the Creator. It means before his half-life had elapsed. Now to the poet, this world is huge and dark. Next 2 lines are, and that one talent which is death to hide, lodging with me useless, through my soul more bent. In these lines, the poetic talent that God has given him is of no use after the poet has become blind. He feels that his poetic talent will remain unused due to blindness. Although the poet's prim convention is to serve God by writing poetry, he is unable to do so due to his blindness, so his soul more bent. Next lines are, to serve therewith my Maker and present my true account, lest he return chid, doth God exact day labor like denied? In these lines, the poet has to be accountable to God for that unused poetic talent. Then the poet introspect, will God hold the poetic accountable? Because God himself has blinded the poet. These questions are asked by the poet himself. Next lines are, I fondly ask but patience to prevent, that murmur soon replies, God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts. Who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. Before that, Milton asking question, he himself, but then he got his answer. The poet's consciousness is awakened and he realized that God has no need of human service or gifts, because the angel is waiting patiently under him and obeying orders without any complaints, and they are doing their best service to God. Last 3 lines are, he states his kingly thousands at his binding speed and post over lands and oceans without rest. They also serve, his patience tells him that God is akin to a king who has many kingdoms under his domain and countless subjects to do as he asks. These are similarly thousands of men on earth who follows God's everything instructions to the letter and who hurry over lands and seas without a moment of rest in the fulfillment of the duties allotted to them. However, these are not the only people who serve God. There are also others who merely stand and wait for God to decide how their lives will go. Their only service to God is to accept whatever trial God puts on their path and deal with such trials with courage and resilience. So end of the poem. The poet thinks man can do the best service to God only by surrendering himself to God unconditionally. In this slide, I will submit some glossary in this poem. Next, we will see what are the literary devices used in this poem. First one is assonance. Assonance is a repetition of vowel sounds. Example, that murmur soon replies, God doth not need. Next one, and post over lands and ocean without rest. Next one is allusion. Allusion is a beliefs and an indirect reference of a person, place, things, or idea of a historical, cultural, political, or literary significance. Example, and that one talent which is dead to hide. Next one, alliteration. Alliteration is a repetition of consonant sounds in same line. Example, doth not need, world and wide. Fourth one is consonants. Consonants is a repetition of consonant sound in the same line. Example is kingly thousands at his binding speed. Next one, and that one talent which is dead to hide. Fifth one, enjambment. It is defined as a thought in verse that does not come to an end at a line break. Rather, it rolls over to the next line. For example, I fondly ask but patience to prevent that murmur soon replies, God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts, who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best, his states. Next one is imagery. Imagery is used to make a reader preserve things involving their five senses. Example, to serve therewith my maker and present, bear his mild yoke, they serve him best, and they also serve who only stand and wait. Next one is metaphor. It is a figure of speech that implied comparison is made between the objects that are different. Example, to serve therewith my maker and present, my true account least he returning chit. Next one is personification. Personification is to give human qualities to inanimate object. Example, I fondly ask but patience to prevent that murmur soon replies. Next one is a pun. A pun is a literary device that is also known as a play on words. Pun involves words with similar or identical sounds but with different meaning. Example, when I consider how my light is spent. Next we will discuss the ERC. First one, and that one talent which is dead to hide lodge with my useless. So what is the reference in these lines taken from On His Blindness, written by John Milton. Context, it was written in 1655, 3 years after Milton became completely blind. Then he feels sad that he will not be able to serve the God with his talent of writing poetry. In explanation part, how he feels sad and unhappy moment. Then condition of blind man feelings. Then he feels that it is like soul killing for him to hide his talent of writing poetry. He is ready to serve God with his talent and presents his true account, but he feels unable to do so due to his blindness. He fears that God will rebuke him for not using this gift. Thus, this line shows Milton lament on his untimely loss of sight. Next one, doth God, they save him best varakum. So reference, these lines are taken from On His Blindness, written by John Milton. Context, the poet is expressing his unhappiness and sadness at lost his eyesight and laments that the best part of his life would go waste without producing any work of creative importance. In this explanation parts, poet's patience console his needling anguish. Next, he tells him God is a master of his universe and he does not need either man's work or return of his gifts. Countless angels are engaged in God's active service and carry out his orders submissively all over the world. Next one, they also serve who only stand and wait. In reference parts, these lines quoted above have been taken from the sonnet on his blindness written by John Milton. Next one, context. The poet expressed his sadness about his blindness. Then he grumbles against God. Then after that, his patience and unshaken faith in God's justice and console him. In explanation part, God is creator of the world. He does not need man's work. God is like a great king. Thousands of angels are at his service. They rush over lands and oceans without rest in order to carry out his commands. But some angels do not work. They stand and only wait for his orders. They are also his best servant. At the end of the poem, the poet signifies patience, devotion, and submission to God by mentioning the phrase stand and wait. Now we will see the short answer. Why is the poet bitter in the opening lines of the poem? The poem begins with a subordinate clause when, which leaves the readers in suspense. The poet talks about his blindness. He has become blind in the middle of the life. Then he expresses his desire to serve God by using the ability which God has given him. Unfortunately, he is unable to fulfill his wish to write because of his blindness. Due to the pain of being blind, Milton starts the poem in bitter tone. Second one, what is the question posted by the poet which is in nature of the complaint? Milton feels that God might scold him for not using his talent. Milton asks whether God needs man's service. He foolishly questions, if God wants man to service him, why did God take away the light from his eyes? He wonders whether he will be able to produce great works being blind. Next one, what is the reply given by his own patient self? As Milton laments about his blindness and God criticism, patience, a guardian angel arrives with the reply that God never need man's service. Whoever is ready to bear the burden of life will serve the God well. God has servants all over the world who are all the time serving him over the land and the oceans without any rest. Why doesn't God need man's work? The poet realized the fact that God does not need man's service and does not take away the talent he has given to men. He is the supreme power and has countless servants. The people who accept all the struggles of life without questioning God serve him the most. Thus, the poem ends with a positive note. Next one, according to Milton, what are the ways in which man can serve God? Milton can also serve God by being patient and also by accepting any difficulties he may experience. Milton is saying that those who bear his mild yoke and who accept whatever God has in store should do so with dignity, which will prove their commitment and loyalty to God, resulting in an agreeable way to serve God. Last one, how does Milton hope to serve God in on his blind? In order to serve God, one should carry the mild yoke that God has given to them. In that way, one could serve God best. Now we will see the summary of the poem. About the poem, John Milton's poem on his blindness is a well-known autobiographical sonnet. It is written in the style of Petrarchan sonnet. Generally, Petrarchan sonnet deals with love, whereas this poem deals with the spiritual, physical pain of the writer. The poem is written in the first person narration, where the poet laments about his loss of sight. Milton lost his eyesight in 1652 when he was 43 years old. He wrote this poem in 1655 when he completely lost his vision. In introduction part, the poem begins with a subordinate clause when, which leaves the readers in suspense. The poet talks about his blindness. he has become blind in middle of his life. Then he expresses his desire to serve God by using the ability which God has given him. Unfortunately, he is unable to fulfill his wish to write because of his blindness. Due to the pain of being blind, Milton starts the poem in bitter tone. Next one, Milton murmuring himself. Milton feels that God might scold him for not using his talent. Milton asks whether God needs man's service. He foolishly questions. If God wants man to service him, why did God take away the lights from his eyes? He wonders whether he will be able to produce great work being blind. Next paragraph of the summary, poet realizes the fact. As Milton lamented about his blindness and God's criticism, Patience, a guardian angel, arrives with the replies that God never need man's service. Then the poet realized that fact, God does not need man's service and does not take away the talent he has given to man. He is the supreme power and has countless servants, the people who accept all the struggles of life without questioning. God serve him the most. Conclusion of the summary. The poem ends with the positive note. The octave of the poem starts with the pain and the problems of blindness. The sestet concludes with the positive notes that accepting the entire struggles without lamenting is servicing God. The poem describes Milton's philosophy of life.
இந்த வீடியோ உங்களுக்கு பிடிச்சிருந்தா மறக்காமல் லைக் பண்ணுங்கள், ஷேர் பண்ணுங்கள், கமெண்ட் பண்ணுங்கள், சப்ஸ்கிரைப் பண்ணி கூட இருக்க பெல் ஐக்கானை ப்ரெஸ் பண்ணுங்கள். தேங்க்யூ ஃபார் வாட்சிங்.